The screams had stopped 3 hours ago, but Captain Vex Corvain still heard them echoing through the abandoned Valthurian arena. His boots crunched on crystalline sand, stained crimson with the blood of 1,000 battles as he swept his plasma rifle across the shadows. The rescue mission had gone sideways, his team scattered, communications dead, and somewhere in this nightmare coliseum, hostile forces hunted him like prey. The arena stretched before him like a wound in reality itself. Towering obsidian walls curved skyward, their surfaces carved with alien hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe in the dim bioluminescent lighting. Spectator boxes hung suspended in the air, empty now but still radiating the psychic residue of countless alien minds drunk on violence and death. This place had been feeding ground for the Valthurian Empire's bloodsport for centuries, until the humans arrived. Vex's enhanced hearing caught something that made his blood freeze, a soft, broken whimper echoing from the arena's center. He'd cleared this section twice, but the sound was unmistakably there. Human, female, dying, moving like a shadow. He descended the spectator steps, his tactical armor's stealth systems bending light around him. The arena floor opened before him, a maze of raised platforms, spike pits, and energy barriers designed to maximize suffering. And there, chained to a massive altar of black metal in the very center, was a figure that shouldn't exist. She was. Human impossibly, miraculously human, but her body had been modified. Her skin held an ethereal luminescence, veins glowing with some alien substance that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her hair, originally auburn, now shimmered with colors that existed beyond normal human perception. She wore the tattered remains of a civilian jumpsuit, but her limbs were bound by energy. Shackles that sparked with each labored breath. Vex's heart hammered as he approached. The woman's eyes still beautifully, achingly human despite everything locked. Onto his as he materialized from stealth, her lips moved, forming words in a voice like broken glass. "Please, don't leave me to die alone. I'm getting you out of here," Vex whispered, his hands already working on the energy restraints. But as his fingers touched the alien metal, warning sirens shrieked through the arena. The Valthurians had found them. "The woman Lyra," she gasped. Her name grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You don't understand," she breathed. "I'm not just their prisoner. I'm their weapon. They've been ... changing me, making me into something that could destroy entire worlds." Red warning lights bathed the arena as armored figures began materializing on the platforms above. Vex's rifle hummed to life, but his eyes never left Lyra's face. In those depths, he saw something that terrified him more than any alien army. She was telling the truth. "Whatever they did to you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them, "you're still human. And no human dies alone on my watch." The energy shackles sparked and died as Vex's military override codes finally broke through. Lyra collapsed into his arms, her transformed body trembling with exhaustion and something else power barely contained. Above them, the Valthurian death squads descended like metal angels of doom. "Can you move?" Vex asked, already knowing the answer from the way she struggled to stand. Lyra's glowing eyes met his. "I can do more than move," she whispered. "But if I use what they gave me, I might not be able to stop." The first plasma bolt seared past Vex's ear, and he made his choice. Human or weapon, she was coming with him. The maintenance tunnels beneath. The arena thrummed with alien machinery, their walls lined with conduits that pulsed like arteries. Vex carried Lyra through the narrow passages, her altered body unnaturally light despite her human proportions. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the clicking of Valthurian claws on metal, the hiss of their breathing apparatus, the whine of charging weapons. "There," Lyra whispered, pointing to a junction ahead. "The biolab. That's where they made me into this." Vex's jaw clenched. He'd seen Valthurian experimentation before the twisted remains of human colonies, the genetic horrors left behind after their raids. But Lyra was different. She was still alive, still human enough to feel pain and fear and hope. They emerged into a vast chamber, filled with tanks of glowing fluid and surgical devices that looked more like instruments of torture. In the center stood a machine that hurt, to look at Tit's surfaces shifting between dimensions. Its purpose written in geometries that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. The ascension engine Lyra breathed, they used it too. To unlock potential, they said, was always in human DNA, dormant evolutionary paths. Vex helped her to a medical scanner, his hands gentle, despite the urgency.
Wow.
The device hummed to life, projecting a holographic display that made his blood run cold. Lyra's entire cellular structure had been rewritten. Her nervous system crackled with bioelectric energy that registered off the scale. Her brain showed activity patterns that shouldn't exist in any known species. "How long?" he asked. 6 months, she said, her voice barely a whisper. 6 months of tests and modifications and ... other things. Her eyes hardened. The Valthurians aren't just conquering worlds anymore, Vex. They're preparing for something bigger, something that requires weapons like me. The chambers blast. Doors suddenly sealed with a resonating clang. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red as a voice spoke from hidden speakers, not the clicking speech of Valthurians, but something else. Something that spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Captain Corvain," the voice said, and Vex's blood froze. "We've been expecting you." A figure materialized from the shadows, tall, pale, wearing a human face, but moving with predatory grace. That was utterly alien. When it smiled, its teeth were too sharp, too numerous. "Allow me to introduce myself," it continued. "I am Architect Null, and I designed the lovely modifications you see before you. Lyra is my masterpiece, the first successful human-Valthurian hybrid. But she's incomplete." Lyra's breathing became labored, her skin's luminescence pulsing faster. "Vex," she gasped, "something's happening. I can feel it awakening." Null's smile widened. "The final stage of transformation requires a catalyst. Extreme stress, mortal danger, or ... double quotes, its eyes fixed on Vex. The presence of another human, someone she cares about. Power began crackling around Lyra's hands, arcing between her fingers, in patterns that hurt to perceive. The air itself seemed to bend and warp around her as her modified DNA fully activated. Vex grabbed her shoulders, trying to ground her, but the energy that coursed through her was like nothing he'd ever felt. "Hit it," he urged. "You're still human, Lyra. You're still in control." But even as he spoke, he could see the truth in her eyes. The power was vast, cosmic in scope. It promised the ability to reshape reality itself, to bend the laws of physics to her will. And with every passing second, it became harder to resist. "I can see it all," she whispered, her voice now layered with harmonics that resonated in his bones. "The Valthurian plan. Not just conquering our galaxy, they're preparing to invade others. Infinite realities, infinite human worlds to harvest and transform." Null nodded approvingly. "The multiverse is vast, and humans exist in most timelines. We need weapons that can cross dimensional barriers. Weapons that can think, adapt, and most importantly, breed." The word hit Vex like a physical blow. He understood now. So they weren't just creating super soldiers. They were creating a new species, one that could reproduce and spread across infinite realities around them. The laboratory began to shake as Lyra's power reached critical mass. The laboratory tore itself apart around them as Lyra's transformation reached its apex. Containment vessels shattered, spilling their contents across the floor in rivers of luminescent fluid. The ascension engine screamed in frequencies that bypassed the ears and stabbed directly into the brain. And through it all, Vex held on to Lyra, his hands burning from the energy that cascaded from her skin. "Don't let go!" she begged, her voice now a symphony of harmonics that spoke to something deep in his genetic memory. "If you let go, I'll lose myself completely." Architect Null watched with scientific fascination as reality warped around them. "Fascinating," it murmured. "The emotional bond is accelerating the process. She's becoming something beyond even our projections." Vex's training kicked in. He'd seen alien bioweapons before, survived encounters with cosmic horrors that had driven entire platoons insane. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about saving the woman he was rapidly realizing meant more to him than his own life. "Tell me how to stop it," he demanded. His rifle trained on Null, even as energy discharges from Lyra's body knocked him off balance. Null's laugh was like breaking glass. "Stop it. Captain, you misunderstand. This is exactly what we wanted." Human capacity for emotional attachment, for love, for sacrifice, these are the final ingredients in our formula. She's not just becoming a weapon. She's becoming a goddess. The truth hit Vex like a physical blow. His presence wasn't saving Lyra, was completing her transformation. Every moment of connection, every desperate attempt to reach her humanity, was feeding the alien modifications in her DNA. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something Null had missed. Yes, the power was vast. Yes, it was alien and terrifying. But underneath it all, Lyra was still fighting, still human. Still the woman who had begged him not to leave her to die alone. "Lyra," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "look at me. Not the power, not the voices in your head. Look at me." Her glowing eyes focused on his face, and for a moment the energy storm around them calmed. "I can see everything," she whispered. "Past, present, future. All the timelines. Where humanity falls, where we become like them. But I can also see ... double quotes. Her breath caught. "I can see the ones where we win." "Show me," Vex said, stepping closer despite the danger. Lyra's hand touched his forehead. Suddenly he was there with her, seeing through her enhanced perception. He saw the Velthurian Empire as it truly was, a parasite that had consumed countless civilizations, adding their biological distinctiveness to its own. He saw the invasion fleet preparing to launch against not just their Earth, but thousands of others across the dimensional barriers. But he also saw the possibilities. The timelines where humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender, their capacity for love and sacrifice and hope, became weapons more powerful than any technology. He saw Lyra, not as a tool of conquest, but as a bridge between what humans were and what they could become. "The choice is yours," Null said, its voice now tinged with uncertainty. "Embrace the power and become our herald of conquest. Or resist and burn out like a dying star, taking your precious captain with you." Vex felt the energy building in Lyra's body, reaching critical mass. In seconds, she would either ascend to godhood or explode in a release of power that would level half the planet. Smart tactical choice was clear: get as far away as possible, and hope the explosion took out the Velthurian forces too. Instead, he pulled her closer. "Whatever happens," he said, his lips against her ear, "we face it together." Human. The word became a catalyst. Not for destruction, but for transformation of a different kind. The alien modifications in Lyra's body suddenly had to contend with something they hadn't been designed for: a human heart that refused to let go. Human soul that chose connection over power. The energy that had been building toward explosion suddenly inverted, flowing not outward, but inward, creating a bond between them that transcended biology. Vex felt his own consciousness expanding, touching the edges of Lyra's transformed perception without losing his essential humanity. And, in that moment of perfect connection, they both understood what they had to do. The bond between them rewrote the rules of what was possible. Vex felt his consciousness merge with Lyra's enhanced perceptions, sharing her multidimensional awareness while she drew strength from his unshakable human core. Together they were something new, not the weapon the Velthurians had envisioned, but something far more dangerous to their plans. Architect Null stepped back, its composure cracking for the first time. "Impossible," it breathed. The modifications should have consumed his neural patterns entirely. "You made one critical error," Lyra said, her voice now perfectly balanced between human warmth and cosmic power. "You thought love was a weakness? To be exploited, but love is what makes us human. And humanity." She smiled, and reality rippled around them. Humanity doesn't know when to quit. The laboratory around them began to dissolve, but not into chaos, to something ordered and beautiful. The alien machinery transformed into gardens of crystalline flowers that sang in harmonies that spoke of hope. The surgical tables became streams of liquid light that flowed with the rhythm of human heartbeats. The ascension engine, that monument, 2 forced evolution. Crumbled into stardust that reformed into constellations, spelling out words in every human language we endure. Null's perfect human facade began to crack, revealing the parasitic entity underneath. You're destroying everything. The grand design, the cosmic order, your cosmic order, Vex interrupted, his voice now carrying harmonics that resonated across dimensional barriers. Built on slavery and torture and the death of everything that makes life worth living. Through their bond, he and Lyra reached out across the quantum foam, touching the edges of other realities. They saw the Velthurian invasion fleets preparing to cross dimensional barriers. Saw the concentration camps where humans were being processed for transformation. Saw the dead worlds left behind after the Empire's harvest. But they also saw something else: resistance. In every timeline, in every reality, humans fought back, not because they could win, but because surrender was unthinkable. It was a pattern that repeated across infinite variations. When faced with extinction, humanity chose to rage against the dying of the light. That's it, Lyra breathed, her consciousness expanding to encompass the quantum battlefield. That's what they can't understand. We don't fight to win. We fight because it's who we are. The power that had been building in her body suddenly found its true purpose. Not as a weapon of conquest, but as a beacon of defiance that would reach across all realities. Every human who had ever refused to kneel, every act of courage in the face of certain death, every moment of love chosen over survival, all of it became part of the signal she was about to send. No, Null snarled, its form now fully revealed as a writhing mass of alien flesh and metal. I will not allow you to contaminate the multiverse with your primitive ideologies. It lunged forward, tendrils of corrupted energy reaching for Lyra's throat. But Vex was there, his body moving with impossible speed and precision. The human genome that the Velthurians had tried to improve had its own hidden depths, evolutionary potential that activated not through alien modification, but through the simple act of protecting someone you love. His hands closed around Null's tendrils, and where they touched, the alien flesh began to burn. Not with fire, but with something far more destructive to the parasitic entity, the absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for. The signal, Lyra gasped, her body beginning to fade as she prepared to broadcast their defiance across the dimensional barriers. I can't maintain it and stay anchored to this reality. Vex, eye together, he said firmly. Dot. His own form beginning to shimmer as he poured his life force into supporting her transformation. We do this together, or not at all. Null's scream shattered the reformed reality around them, but it was too late. The signal was already propagating, spreading from timeline to timeline, like a virus of hope. In every reality where humanity faced extinction, they would now know they were not alone. They would know that somewhere in the vast multiverse, 2 humans had chosen love over power, sacrifice over survival, and in doing so had lit a fire that would burn across infinite worlds. The last thing Vex saw before they dispersed into pure energy was Lyra's smile, fully human, completely unafraid, and absolutely beautiful. The signal reached Earth first, blazing across the quantum foam like a meteor of pure intention. In the command bunkers, where humanity's last leaders planned their desperate defense, screens flickered to life, showing impossible data streams. The message was clear. The Velthurian Empire's greatest weapon had turned against them. Admiral Cora Voss stood in the war room, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays showing their transformed reality. The alien invasion fleet that had been preparing to cross dimensional barriers was in chaos. Their hybrid soldiers rebelling, their command structure collapsing as the fundamental assumptions of their conquest strategy crumbled. How? She asked. The technician monitoring the quantum communications array. The signal carries more than just information, the young woman replied, her voice filled with wonder. It's rewriting the base code of the Velthurian modifications. Every human they've experimented on, every hybrid they've created, they're all remembering what they were fighting for. Across the galaxy, in the processing centers where humans were being prepared for transformation, the impossible was happening. Subjects who had been broken by months of torture and modification were standing up, their eyes blazing with renewed purpose. The alien machinery designed to strip away their humanity was sparking and dying as the signal reached them. But the true power of what Vex and Lyra had accomplished wasn't just in the freedom of the enslaved, it was in the fundamental change they had wrought in the nature of reality itself. In a parallel Earth where the Valthurians had arrived 50 years earlier, Sarah Chena, resistance fighter who had been captured and scheduled for processing, suddenly found herself surrounded by rebels whose eyes glowed with the same inner light she now felt. They moved with purpose that transcended their individual capabilities, connected by something deeper than shared cause. "Can you feel it?" asked Marcus, a former soldier whose body bore the scars of partial transformation. "It's like someone's calling to us across the stars." Sarah nodded, her consciousness briefly touching something vast and warm and utterly human. For a moment, she glimpsed another timeline, saw a woman with luminescent skin and a man with unbreakable resolve. Saw their moment of perfect connection as they chose to sacrifice themselves for something greater than survival. "They're showing us the way," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "We don't have to fight alone anymore." The revelation spread like wildfire through the resistance network. Humans who had been isolated, outgunned, and slowly losing hope suddenly found themselves connected to something larger. Not a hive mind that was the Valthurian way, but a network of individual consciousness choosing to stand together on a world where the invasion had been successful, where humanity had been driven to the edge of extinction. The signal reached a small group of survivors hiding in the ruins of what had once been New Tokyo. They were children, mostly raised in the ashes of their civilization with nothing but stories of what the world had been like before. 8-year-old Kenji felt that signal first, his young mind more receptive to the quantum frequencies. He stood up from the rubble where he'd been playing, his eyes wide with wonder. "Do you hear that?" he asked his older sister. But it wasn't something they heard with their ears. It was something they felt in their bones, in the deepest part of their genetic memory. The signal carried within it the essence of what it meant to be human, not just the capacity for love and sacrifice, but the stubborn refusal to let those qualities die. The children began to glow, not with alien modification, but with something far more profound. They were becoming what humanity had always had the potential to be, not through forced evolution, but through the simple act of choosing to hope when hope seemed impossible. Across the multiverse, the pattern repeated. In every timeline where the Valthurians had gained the upper hand, humans were remembering not just who they were, but who they could become. The signal didn't make them into weapons or gods, it made them into something far more dangerous to the Empire's plans. It made them united in the space between realities. Where the Valthurian command structure existed as pure information, panic was spreading. The empire that had consumed thousands of civilizations was facing something it had never encountered: a prey species that grew stronger under pressure, that found ways to turn their greatest weaknesses into unbreakable strengths. "Seal the dimensional barriers," ordered High Command. "Quarantine the infected timelines. We cannot allow this contamination to spread further." But it was too late. The signal had already reached the quantum substrate that underlay all realities. Every timeline where humans existed, where they faced extinction or slavery or transformation, was now connected by threads of shared defiance. And in that connection, something new was being born. The dimensional barriers between realities began. Too thin as the signal reached critical mass, what had started as a desperate act of love between two humans was becoming something that transcended the boundaries of individual timelines. The Valthurian Empire, which had existed by isolating and consuming civilizations one by one, now faced an enemy that existed across infinite dimensions simultaneously. In the quantum realm where consciousness becomes energy, Vex and Lyra discovered they had not died, they had transcended. Their love had become a living force that flowed through the dimensional barriers, connecting every human who had ever refused to surrender their essential nature to alien domination. "We're not just two anymore," Lyra said, her voice now harmonizing. with the voices of countless others, where everyone who ever chose love over power, sacrifice over survival, through their expanded awareness, they could see the Empire's true nature, not conquerors, but parasites. They consumed civilizations not out of malice, but out of desperate need. They were a dying species, using the biological distinctiveness of others to stave off their own extinction, but in trying to remake humanity in their image, they had made a critical error. They had assumed that human strength came from individual power, from the ability to dominate and control. They had missed the fundamental truth that made humanity dangerous. Their strength came from connection, from their willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. Now, as the signal spread, humans across infinite realities were discovering they could share more than just hope, could share knowledge, experience, even fragments of consciousness. A resistance fighter in one timeline could suddenly access the tactical expertise of a soldier in another. A scientist facing an impossible problem could draw on the collective knowledge of her counterparts across the multiverse. The Valthurian response was swift and ruthless. If they couldn't control the contamination, they would cauterize it. Dimensional annihilation weapons, tools capable of erasing entire timelines from existence, were brought online. Better to lose the human civilizations entirely than allow this spreading. Unity to reach other species, but the humans were ready. In the space between realities, Vex and Lyra had become something new, not individuals, but focal points for humanity's collective will. They reached out across the quantum foam, touching every human consciousness that was willing to join them, creating a network of resistance that existed outside the normal flow of time and space. "They're going to try to erase us," Vex warned, his voice carrying across infinite worlds. "Not just kill us, Make. It's so we never existed at all." "Then we make sure they can't," Lyra replied, her consciousness expanding to encompass the weapon systems the Empire was bringing to bear. "We don't just survive this. We make it impossible for them to do this to anyone else." The first annihilation beam lanced across dimensional barriers, targeting the Earth, where their signal had originated. But instead of erasing that timeline, it struck something unexpected, a barrier of pure human will, formed by the combined consciousness of every human who had ever lived or died fighting for their freedom. The beam scattered, its energy absorbed and redirected. Instead of destroying the timeline, it strengthened the connections between them. The Valthurian weapon designed to erase hope had become a tool for spreading it. "Impossible," breathed the High Command, their voices rippling across dimensional space. "The annihilation beams are absolute. Nothing can survive them." But they were thinking like parasites, like creatures that existed by consuming others. They couldn't comprehend what they were facing, a species that grew stronger through connection. It found ways to transform their greatest losses into their greatest strengths. As more annihilation beams fired, the pattern repeated. Each attack was absorbed, transformed, and redirected. The Empire's most powerful weapons were becoming the fuel for humanity's ascension, not to godhood, that was still the Valthurian way of thinking, to something far simpler and far more dangerous. They were becoming exactly what they had always been: human. But now, they were human across infinite realities. With the full weight of their species, history, and potential behind them, in the quantum space where the battle was truly being fought, Vex and Lyra found themselves facing the heart of the Empire itself, a writhing mass of parasitic consciousness that had been consuming civilizations for eons. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien. But it was also dying, rotting from within. As its stolen evolutionary adaptations rejected each other, "You have doomed us all," it whispered, its voice like the death rattle of galaxies. "Without us, your species will stagnate. You will never reach your full potential." Lyra's response carried the weight of every human who had ever chosen to love, despite the certainty of loss. "Our potential was never about power. It was about connection. It's about choosing to stand together even when standing alone would be easier. About refusing to let anyone die alone," Vex added, his consciousness intertwining with hers in a pattern that resonated across dimensions. The parasite entity recoiled from their combined presence, its stolen adaptations beginning to unravel. It had consumed thousands of species, but it had never encountered one that grew stronger through unity rather than domination. Around them, the dimensional barriers began to stabilize. The Empire's weapon systems fell silent. Not destroyed, but transformed, their purpose changed from instruments of conquest to tools of connection. The hybrid soldiers who had been created to serve as weapons found themselves free to choose their own paths, but the true victory was simpler than that. Across infinite realities, humanity was no longer alone. 6 months after the signal first blazed across the quantum foam, the universe had become a very different place. The Velthurian Empire, that ancient parasite that had consumed civilizations, for millennia had not been destroyed, had been transformed. Without the constant need to consume and dominate, its constituent species began to remember what they had been before assimilation. In the command center of Earth's primary space station, Admiral Cora Voss stood before a viewscreen that showed something unprecedented: a fleet of ships from a dozen different timelines, all crewed by humans and former Velthurian subjects working together. The dimensional barriers hadn't collapsed, they had become permeable, allowing for communication and cooperation across infinite realities. "Status report," she requested, though she already knew the answer would be positive. "For months now, rehabilitation programs are exceeding all projections," reported Dr. Elena Martinez, a xenobiologist who had been leading the effort to help former hybrids adapt to their new freedom. "The subjects who were partially transformed are choosing to keep their modifications, but they're using them to help others rather than to conquer." Through the quantum link that now connected all willing human consciousness, Voss could feel the truth of those words. The abilities that had been forced upon humans through alien experimentation were being used to heal, to explore, to create connections between species that had never been possible before. But the real change was more profound than that. In the quantum space, where consciousness became energy, Vex and Lyra had become something new, not gods or weapons, but guardians. They existed now as living embodiments of humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to let anyone face extinction alone. "We can feel every human consciousness that reaches out," Lyra's voice whispered across the dimensional networks, carrying comfort to those who needed it most. "Every child being born, every scientist making a breakthrough, every artist creating something beautiful. We're all connected now, but we're all still individual, still human." The implications were staggering. When a research team in Timeline 7 made a breakthrough in quantum medicine, the knowledge was instantly available too. Their counterparts in Timeline 12, who were facing a plague. When explorers in Timeline 3 discovered a new form of life, xenobiologists across the multiverse could contribute to first contact protocols. But perhaps more importantly, no human would ever again face the darkness alone. The elderly could draw comfort from knowing their experiences and wisdom were part of a greater tapestry. Children could feel the love and protection of infinite families. Those facing death could sense the continuation of their species across realities beyond counting. The former Velthurian territories had become something unprecedented, cooperative of species working together not out of domination, but out of mutual benefit. The parasitic empire that had consumed civilizations was being replaced by something that helped them flourish in the quantum realm. The entity that had once been the empire's core consciousness was changing too. Stripped of its stolen adaptations, it was discovering its original nature, a species that had once been explorers and teachers, seeking knowledge and connection rather than conquest. The parasite had been born from desperation, from the fear of extinction. But now, connected to the human network of consciousness, it was remembering what it meant to hope. "This is what we feared," it admitted to Vex and Lyra, its voice now carrying wonder rather than malice. "Stagnation. We thought we had to consume others to continue growing. But you've shown us another way." "The way of connection," Vex replied, his consciousness still intertwined with Lyra's in patterns that spoke of eternal devotion. Growth through unity rather than domination. The transformation rippled outward through space and time. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rediscovering their original cultures. Technologies that had been perverted to serve conquest were being adapted for exploration and creation. The dark age of parasitic empire was ending, replaced by something that had never existed before, truly cooperative galactic civilization. But the most beautiful change was the simplest one, a small medical facility on the original Earth. A young woman named Maya was giving birth to her first child. The delivery was difficult, dangerous, and she was frightened. But as the pain reached its peak, she felt something extraordinary, the presence of countless other women across infinite realities who had faced the same fear and found the strength to continue. Not just human women, but females of dozens of species, all connected by the simple act of bringing new life into the universe. For a moment, she was not alone with her pain. She was part of something vast and loving and utterly unbreakable. When her daughter was born, the child's eyes held a light that spoke of infinite possibilities, not because she had been modified or enhanced, but because she had been born into a universe where love was stronger than fear, where connection was more powerful than conquest. In the quantum space where they had become eternal guardians, Vex and Lyra felt the birth as a moment of perfect joy. They had not just saved humanity, they had helped create a universe where every consciousness could choose to be connected, where no one ever had to face extinction alone. Was it worth it? Lyra asked, her consciousness touching the newborn child's mind with gentle blessing. Vex's response carried the weight of infinite love, to save not just our species, but to teach the universe itself what it means to be human, to ensure that love is stronger than fear, that connection is more powerful than domination, that no one ever has to die alone. His consciousness merged more fully with hers, their love now part of the fundamental structure of reality itself. It was worth everything. And across infinite realities, in the quantum foam, where all possibilities existed, their truth echoed eternal. Humanity endures, not because they are the strongest, but because they refuse to let anyone face the darkness alone. The universe had learned to love, and it would never be the same. In the end, what saved humanity was not their weapons or their technology, but their most fundamental nature, their refusal to let anyone die alone. In choosing connection over conquest, love over power, to humans had not just saved their species, but had taught the universe itself what it meant to be human.